The red and blue lights flared in her rearview mirror like a predator's eyes cutting through the night. Judge Amara Diallo's grip on the leather steering wheel tightened until her knuckles blanched against her deep brown skin. She had been here before. Not this exact stretch of road, not this exact officer, but she knew the script. In this country there were unwritten rules, and she had learned them young. Rule 1. Keep your hands visible. Rule 2. Speak calmly, even when your blood is boiling. Rule 3. Survive first. Fight later. The siren wailed again, urgent and sharp, as the white patrol car swerved close enough that she could see the pale flash of a uniformed arm waving for her to pull over. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't rolled through a light. She hadn't been drinking. But she knew that being black in the wrong neighborhood was sometimes the only probable cause an officer needed. Amara flicked her turn signal and eased onto the narrow shoulder of Rotherham Avenue. Rain slicked the pavement, distorting the neon reflections from a nearby gas station into trembling streaks of pink and blue. Her heartbeat stayed steady, but her mind raced. She thought of all the times she'd heard this story from her clients, before she was a judge, back when she was a defense attorney fighting uphill battles in a system tilted against them. But tonight she wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't wearing a robe. She wasn't behind the bench. Tonight, she was just a black woman alone in her car, stopped by a man with a badge. And this man was already walking toward her window with the swagger of someone who thought the world belonged to him. Officer Brent Halvorson. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hair cut to regulation perfection. His pale blue eyes scanning the inside of her car like a hawk searching for prey. His name tag gleamed under the streetlight, but the sneer curling his lips was what caught her attention. He didn't greet her. He didn't explain the stop. He simply barked, "License and registration." Amara's voice came out calm, deliberate. "I'll get them," she said, moving slowly. Her hands exaggerated in their motions, so he couldn't later claim she'd been reaching for something. But Halvorson wasn't looking at her paperwork. His eyes had already locked on the sleek black Mercedes she was driving. "Whose car is this?" he asked. "It's mine." "Wrong," he said with a smirk. "This vehicle was reported stolen." A ripple of heat shot through her, but she kept her face neutral. She'd dealt with arrogant attorneys, corrupt politicians, and dangerous criminals. But there was something about his tone, that subtle inflection on stolen, that felt like more than procedure. It was accusation wrapped in prejudice. Halvorson stepped back, his right hand hovering just close enough to his holstered gun to send a message. "I'm gonna need you to step out of the car, ma'am." The ma'am dripped with venom. From the corner of her eye she saw movement. A young man with a hoodie had stopped on the sidewalk. He was holding up his phone, recording. Then another person, and another. Phones were coming out now, lenses catching every drop of rain, every step of this interaction. "You are making a mistake, officer," Amara said softly, her tone almost gentle. But her eyes held steel, because she knew something he didn't. She knew every law he was about to violate. She knew every procedural safeguard he was about to trample. And in a matter of days she could and would dismantle his career. But she also knew something else. This wasn't random. Not tonight. Not with this name. 2 hours earlier, the city of Caldenberg had been shivering under a cold spring rain since morning. From her chambers, Amara could see the courthouse steps glistening under the gray sky. She had just concluded one of the most high-profile cases of her career, sentencing Victor Halvorson, a real estate tycoon with more power than scruples, to 8 years in prison for fraud and housing discrimination. The case had drawn national coverage. Protesters had lined the courthouse steps. Headlines had blared her name alongside his for months, and the verdict had landed like a thunderclap. Victor Halvorson was not only wealthy, he was connected. Connected enough to have cousins in City Hall, friends on the state board, and, as it happened, a nephew in the Caldenberg Police Department. A nephew named Brent Halvorson. Amara didn't know it yet, but the moment she slid into her black Mercedes that afternoon, a quiet plan for payback was already in motion. The radio call would go out just minutes later. Black female in a black Mercedes. Possible stolen vehicle. Suspect may be armed. Approach with caution. Rainwater dripped from Halvorson's cap as he motioned again for her to step out. Her black heels clicked against the wet asphalt as she complied, every movement slow, deliberate. The crowd was bigger now. Students from the cafe across the street. A delivery driver. A mother holding her toddler close. Phones everywhere. Face the vehicle. Hands on the hood. Halvorson ordered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Amara didn't move. Instead, she turned to face him, posture regal, chin slightly lifted, the way she did when delivering a verdict. "Officer," she said, each syllable measured. "Are you placing me under arrest?" His smirk widened. "We'll see after I run the VIN. Step aside." Her gaze didn't waver. "Before you do," she said evenly, "you should know that every moment of this unlawful stop is being recorded. Not just by those witnesses, but by the dashcam in your own patrol car. Your badge number is 4721. Correct." For the first time, the smirk faltered. "How do you? I'm Judge Amara Diallo, Superior Court, Caldenberg." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Brent Halvorson's jaw tightened. "Judge or not, this car was reported stolen. I'm doing my job." She took a step closer. "Your job is to enforce the law, not invent probable cause because you don't think a black woman belongs in a Mercedes." The delivery driver in the crowd muttered, "Damn, she's right." Halvorson's ears flushed red. "Ma'am, I suggest you cooperate before you make things worse for yourself." That's when she reached for her phone. She dialed, waited 2 beats. "Chief Langenfeld," she said when the call connected, her voice carrying just enough for the crowd and Halvorson to hear. "Yes, I'm on Rotherham and 12th. One of your officers, Brent Halvorson, badge 4721, has conducted an illegal stop, accused me of auto theft without cause, and is detaining me in front of witnesses." Halvorson froze. The chief's name was a loaded weapon, and she just fired it. "Oh, and Chief," she added, her eyes locked on Brent. "Officer Halvorson is related to Victor Halvorson, siren grew whom I sentenced to prison this morning, through the damp air like a blade. Coincidence." Rain continued to spit like a low gray clouds, phones tilted closer against the slick pavement. Even the rain seemed to pause. The crowd had grown from a somewhere handful in the to at least 20 onlookers now. Another siren began some whispering into their phones, others streaming live to social media. Halvorson shifted his weight. His stance was still wide, aggressive, but there was something new in his posture now. Not fear. Not yet. But uncertainty. Amara could feel it. She had seen the same flicker in hostile witnesses on the stand. The moment they realized the ground beneath them was less solid than they thought. The distant siren became a close wail as a second patrol car slid to the curb, followed by a black SUV with tinted windows that gleamed wet under the streetlights. The SUV's driver's door opened. Out stepped Chief Langenfeld, tall, broad-chested, with silver hair and a face weathered by decades in law enforcement. His eyes swept over the scene, lingering for a half-second on the small crowd before locking on Amara. "Judge Diallo," he said, voice firm but polite. "What's going on here?" Before she could answer, Halvorson spoke, his tone clipped and defensive. "Chief, the vehicle was reported stolen." "Aye." "Inside," Langenfeld barked, cutting him off. "Sir, I said inside. Now." Every word was an order carved in stone. Halvorson hesitated, just long enough to make it look like defiance, but then turned sharply and marched toward his patrol car, his boots splashing through shallow puddles. The crowd's murmur swelled. Phones followed him, recording every step. Langenfeld turned back to Amara, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "My sincerest apologies, Judge. I assure you this will be addressed internally." She met his gaze evenly. "I'm sure it will," she replied. "But it will also be addressed publicly." His brow furrowed. "Publicly?" "Yes, in court, under oath, with full transparency." Something in her tone made him straighten slightly, as though reminded she wasn't just any citizen. She was a judge, and one not afraid of the storm she was summoning. The chief exhaled. "Judge, are you sure you want to go that route? It'll be messy." "The media." "Chief," she interrupted. "Messy is what happens when we try to hide things. I believe in cleaning up the mess in daylight. The delivery driver in the crowd said, just loud enough for others to hear, she's a boss. Amara turned, scanning the small sea of phones, faces, and raincoats. Thank you for your time, she said to the chief, before walking back to her Mercedes. Every step was deliberate. The engine purred to life. She eased away from the curb, leaving the chief standing in the rain and Officer Brent Halvorsen glowering from behind the tinted glass of the SUV. That night, the videos hit social media before she even reached her driveway. Multiple angles, multiple narrators, some shaky and grainy, others surprisingly clear. The hashtags began trending before midnight. Hashtag Black Judge, hashtag Racist Cop, hashtag Justice for Amara, hashtag Caldenberg PD. By morning, her phone was buzzing with calls from local reporters, then national ones. The clips had spread beyond Caldenberg, drawing commentary from legal experts, civil rights advocates, and political pundits. Some praised her composure. Some attacked her for making it about race. But all of them, every single outlet, had put her name and Brent Halvorsen's name in the same headline. She didn't respond to any interviews. Not yet. She had a bigger move to prepare. Amara walked through the marble-floored lobby, her heels clicking with authority. At her side was Marcus Reyes, her longtime friend and former law school classmate, now a respected civil rights attorney. You're sure you want to go nuclear? Marcus murmured as they approached the conference room. Marcus, she said without breaking stride. They already brought the war to my doorstep. I'm just taking it to the right battlefield. The battlefield was a press conference called not by her, but by the mayor's office. They were clearly hoping to control the narrative, to reassure the public that the situation was under review. The mayor, a man whose handshake was more political theater than genuine warmth, stood at the podium when she entered. His smile faltered for a heartbeat before returning, tight and practiced. Judge Diallo, he greeted. Glad you could join us. Hopefully we can all agree to keep this civil. She offered a polite but non-committal smile. Civility isn't a problem, Mr. Mayor. Truth is the part one care about. Reporters turned, sensing the undercurrent. The room practically hummed with anticipation. When the press conference began, the mayor's talking points were exactly what Amara expected. Isolated incident. No conclusions until the investigation is complete. Respect for all parties involved. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped to the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out over the sea of cameras. I appreciate the mayor's commitment to investigation, she began. But I believe the public deserves more than promises. You deserve facts. The reporters leaned forward. On the evening of April 17th, Officer Brent Halvorsen conducted a traffic stop without probable cause. He accused me of auto theft before verifying the vehicle identification number. He escalated the encounter without justification. And he failed to disclose that he is the nephew of Victor Halvorsen, a man I sentenced to prison earlier that same day. A murmur rippled through the room. Pens scribbled furiously. Conflict of interest is not a technicality, she continued. It's the difference between lawful authority and abuse of power. Flashes erupted as photographers tried to catch the fire in her eyes. I will be filing a formal complaint with the Internal Affairs Division, but I will also be seeking an independent review by a state-appointed panel, because this is not just about one officer. It's about the system that allows personal vendettas to masquerade as policing. She stepped away from the podium without waiting for questions. The headlines the next morning made it clear. The city's attempt to control the damage had backfired. Brent Halvorsen slammed his phone down on the table, the latest news headline flashing in his mind. Black judge takes on racist cop. Public hearing set for May 6th. He paced, jaw tight, fingers twitching. This is crap, he muttered to himself. She was making him the villain. She was turning the whole city against him. And yet, deep down, he knew the videos didn't lie. He had been aggressive. He had decided before even approaching her car that she didn't belong in it. But admitting that, even to himself, was impossible. He poured a drink instead. May 6th, the hearing. The courthouse was surrounded by reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers. Signs waved in the chilly morning breeze. Justice for Amara. Bias has no badge. Accountability now. Inside courtroom 2B. The air buzzed with anticipation. This wasn't a trial. Not yet. But a public misconduct hearing that could decide whether Halvorsen kept his badge. Amara sat at the complainant's table, wearing a deep navy suit and her signature pearl earrings. Marcus sat beside her, legal pad at the ready. Across the aisle, Brent Halvorsen sat rigid, his union-appointed lawyer flipping through a stack of papers. His eyes darted around the room, avoiding hers. The panel of three, 2 judges from neighboring districts and 1 civilian oversight member, entered and took their seats. The hearing began. Amara was called to testify first. She recounted every detail of the rainy evening, her voice steady and deliberate. She described the moment the lights flashed in her mirror, the false accusation, the crowd gathering, and the call to the chief. Then she dropped the first piece of evidence, the dashcam footage. On the big screen, the stop played out exactly as she described. The panel members' expressions hardened as they watched Halvorsen accuse her of driving a stolen vehicle without once checking the VIN. The defense shifted uncomfortably. But Amara wasn't done. Next, she introduced the dispatch call logs, showing the stolen car report had originated from a prepaid cell phone purchased that very morning at a store less than a mile from Victor Halvorsen's residence. The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. The panel called a recess. Outside, the crowd chanted, their voices echoing off the courthouse walls. Amara stood by the window in the lobby, looking down at them. She didn't smile. This wasn't over. Not yet. Because the most damning evidence, the part that would end Brent Halvorsen's career, was still to come. The courtroom was suffocating. Not because of the heat, but because of the tension that wrapped around everyone like an invisible rope. Every seat was taken. The media cameras were ready, their red lights blinking like hungry eyes. The public gallery overflowed with faces. Some angry, some hopeful, some simply curious. In the front row sat Maria, her eyes locked on the defendant's table. On the other side of the room, the man who had destroyed her life sat in his tailored suit, looking more like a businessman than someone accused of one of the most heartless crimes in recent history. Detective Rios sat just behind Maria, his hands clasped tightly, jaw set. This wasn't just a case anymore, it was personal. The judge entered, and the murmurs died instantly. Everyone rose, the creak of wooden benches echoing in the silence. As the trial began, the prosecutor laid out the evidence like a surgeon with a scalpel. Each detail was deliberate, precise, and cutting. Security footage, bank records, forged documents. Piece by piece, the puzzle of corruption and betrayal came together. But then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The prosecutor turned to the witness stand and called the next person. Maria Lopez. She rose slowly, feeling every eye in the room on her. Each step toward the witness stand felt heavier than the last. As she took the oath and sat down, she could see him, the man who had once smiled at her as if she mattered, staring at her now with cold, calculating eyes. Maria, the prosecutor began softly, can you tell the court what happened the night your life changed? Maria's throat tightened. For a moment, she thought she wouldn't be able to speak. But then she looked at the jurors, at the women in the crowd holding signs for justice, at Detective Rios giving her a barely noticeable nod. She spoke. Her voice trembled at first, but the more she talked, the stronger she became. She told them about the lies, the threats, the way he had manipulated and intimidated her. She described the night she realized that no one in power would save her, except the detective who had risked his career to do so. The defense tried to twist her words, to paint her as bitter, as someone with a personal vendetta. But Maria didn't falter. Every question, every attempt to trap her, she answered with truth that cut through their lies like a blade. By the time she stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that's empty, but the kind that's heavy with realization. The defense called their witnesses, but the cracks in their story were too big to ignore. And when the final arguments were made, the truth stood taller than any lie could. Hours later, the jury returned. Everyone stood as the foreman read the verdict. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On the charge of abuse of power, guilty. On the charge of destruction of evidence, guilty. Maria's knees went weak. She felt Detective Rios's hand steady her as the judge read the sentencing. Decades in prison. The man who thought he was untouchable was led away in handcuffs. His confident swagger replaced with the slow walk of defeat. But the story didn't end there. Outside the courthouse, Maria was met by reporters and flashing cameras. She didn't speak for fame or for headlines. She spoke for every person who had been silenced, for everyone who had been told they couldn't fight back. This wasn't just justice for me, she said into the microphones. This is proof that no matter how powerful someone seems, the truth will always have a voice. Detective Rios stood off to the side, watching with quiet pride. He knew this victory had come at a cost. He'd lost friends on the force, faced threats, and had been marked as difficult by those who preferred silence to justice. But he also knew he'd do it all again. Later that night, Maria visited her father's grave. The wind was gentle, carrying with it the faint hum of the city. She placed a small bouquet of flowers down and whispered, "We did it." As she turned to leave, a thought stayed with her. Justice was never about just one case. It was about the chain reaction it sparked. Somewhere out there, someone would see her fight and decide to fight too. And that, she knew, was the real victory. If you were in Maria's place, facing someone with power, wealth, and influence, would you have the courage to speak out, even if it meant risking everything? Tell us in the comments below. And if you believe in standing for justice no matter the cost, hit that subscribe button now so we can keep sharing stories that matter.